Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum and I'm here today at the British Royal Armouries taking a look at a couple of their fantastically cool prototype rifles from their extensive reference collection. Today we have the WF-54. This is a prototype rifle from Waffenfabrik Bern in Switzerland, and this is a second rifle in the series of basically development of the rifle that would eventually lose to SIG and not become the Sturmgewehr 57. So in the years after World War II, Switzerland was looking to replace its bolt-action rifles, its K31s and earlier Schmidt-Rubens, with something self-loading. They initially Bern initially experiments with some intermediate cartridges, and they make essentially a copy of the FG42 in a 7.5 by 38 millimeter Kurz cartridge. And I have a previous video on this. This is the WF-51, and you should definitely check that video out if you haven't yet. It's got a little more of the backstory about these trials. Essentially what happens is the 51 in intermediate 7.5 goes through some troop trials, and there are some revisions needed. There's a 53 pattern, and then we come to this one, the 54 pattern. There would subsequently be a 55 and a 56. 56 is the last version. What's interesting is at this point, they start realizing that, or they decide, we don't like the intermediate cartridge and we want to stick with a full power cartridge, 7.5 by 55, the GP11 cartridge. So you can see the difference in magazine size there. Get them out there in the light. This is essentially very similar to an LMG 25 mag. We'll compare it directly in a moment. In addition to that, the 1954 pattern here has kind of gone backwards on a lot of the portability elements. That early 51 was a very compact rifle, reduced power cartridge, shortish barrel. It's a quasi bullpup design with a side-mounted magazine here, which allows you to make things compact. But with the 54 here, they've kind of gone the other way and made it a little bit more like a support weapon. You can see they have a skeletonized butt plate that allows you to have a rear hand support in the back of the gun. They've given it quite a long barrel. They've set it up with a grenade launching spigot. And beyond that, we still have a select fire rifle. I should say, you'll see this when we take it apart. It is no longer incorporates the open bolt versus closed bolt functionality that the FG42 had. This is now only a closed bolt gun. So let's dive in, take a closer look, and take it apart. Let's dig in here. The charging handle is kind of a good starting point because it's still sort of that distinctive Swiss beer keg sort of design, but it's been simplified. It's no longer tapered. It's just a little less fancy, and that kind of goes for all elements of this rifle compared to that earlier WF-51. Now, there are a few new elements here. For one thing, we now have this stamped sheet metal trigger that folds down and allows you to fire the rifle with heavy gloves on below the actual trigger guard, and then folds up, and it locks into that little notch when not in use to keep it out of the way. Instead of the rather clumsy FG-style pull out and rotate selector switch, we now have a much simpler switch right under the user's thumb for full auto and semi-auto. We still have this crossbolt, F for fire, and S for safe. S is going to lock the trigger and also lock the bolt from moving. Our sights are still the folding FG42 pattern, and they still go up to 600 meters. The same folding front sight pattern with that hood. Like I said, we now have a grenade launching spigot on it. There's your little retaining ring. The bipod is the same basic style, but now quite a bit longer. And the bipod is still removable, but now there's a second attachment point. You can mount it on this collar up here at the front of the gun instead. So you can have the mid-mounted bipod that opens to the rear, or you can have a front-mounted bipod that opens forward. Generally speaking, the rear-mounted bipod gives you not as much support for precise shooting, but gives you a wider field of fire where you can pivot the gun without having to move your body. Having the bipod support in the front makes the gun more controllable, more accurate, but you have a lot less angle of coverage, essentially, before you have to shimmy yourself around to pivot the gun. The disassembly method is a little bit different now. We have a tension clamp here that I can happily pop off with a screwdriver. That then allows me to lift up that side of the bipod and drop the whole assembly off. So that closes it, and then this spring tab locks it in place. By the way, the bipod is numbered 212, while our gun is 214. Unlike the earlier pattern, we do actually have a Waffenfabrik Bern marking with a big Swiss crest. We do also have a magazine dust cover that's held in place by the magazine catch. So when you hit the mag release button to put in a magazine, it automatically opens the dust cover and can snap it shut to keep everything tight and clean. Like the original FG42, we have a 4-position adjustable gas block here, which is just fairly easily adjusted with sort of any tool. Cartridge case could sort of do it. We have those, the gas positions are marked 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then there's also a V here, which I believe is no gas. That's the cutoff for when you're launching grenades. Let's take a quick look at the magazine. It looks very much like an LMG25 magazine, which would make sense. They're both side-loading magazines. They're both for the GP11 cartridge. This one is conveniently marked 28 cartridge, 28 shot, Patronen. What's interesting to me, and the magazines do not interchange, by the way. You can't put, this is an LMG25 mag, which you cannot actually fit into this rifle. If we look at these up top, the LMG25 mag is actually a single feed magazine, where the Bern rifle is a double feed. That's kind of interesting. This is definitely the better magazine, but this is the one that actually got used. I do want to point out this is essentially a right hand only gun, because when you fire, that charging handle is coming way back, it reciprocates with the bolt, and there's a very high likelihood that's going to smack you right in the face with some significant energy when you're shooting. So fire this from the right side only. Now, let's go ahead and disassemble it. We have one pin in the back here. Pop that out. That is a captive pin. And then the butt plate has this hook on top. So when it's in position, it hooks up there and then pivots down. So when you open it, that allows it out. And we now have a fully captive recoil spring attached to the removable butt plate. So this is a nice improvement over the earlier iterations. Also an improvement over the FG42, the original one. With the spring out, we can now pull out the bolt and carrier. Notice that unlike previous iterations and the original FG, the bolt handle is now permanently attached to the op rod / gas piston. This retains its same tilting locking wedge style of operation, but it's been substantially simplified over the WF51 pattern. So that's our locking surface right there. It's going to lock against this lug up in the receiver, which we can't really get a good view of. It's also interesting to note that the only way that they were able to have this bolt handle permanently attached is to actually have a continuous slot in the receiver for it to slide in. That's why it can come out the back. So this receiver has this sort of rectangular profile, but it has an empty open cut in it all the way up to here, which I have to imagine would cause some durability issues for the gun long term. You can see it's got a bit of flex just already because it's like a foot long, unsupported there. That can't have been a good thing, but I don't know how bad of a thing it really was. If we look at the underside of the bolt carrier, we can see there's no longer a hook up here, a sear catch for open bolt firing. We just have a semi-auto sear and a safety catch. So if the bolt bounces a little bit, it'll catch on the safety catch rather than chamber a cartridge and fire it unintentionally, because this will fire as soon as it is fully locked. So I should have shown this earlier. When this locks in battery, it's actually going to come back to roughly this position. The sear will catch the bolt carrier here, but the bolt carrier is still under substantial spring tension. The bolt is not actually locked. Then when you pull the trigger, the bolt carrier drops forward. It lifts the locking wedge up into position, which locks the gun, and you can actually see the firing pin there moving forward until when it's all the way forward, it protrudes through the bolt face and fires. So that's still a carryover from the FG42. And the firing pin is retained in there by a little wire spring, so I can pop it out backwards. You can sort of see it in there. We still have this little, there you go, coil wire spring right there that keeps the firing pin from falling out. Nice sturdy firing pin there. Next up, to remove the fire control bits and the pistol grip, instead of that potentially clunky flat spring plate, we now have just a single pin. So I just pull that pin out. This has a locking lug on the front, and I can lift the whole fire control group out. Now, unlike our WF-51, this has a properly Swiss, just massive fire control bits in there, but fundamentally we have sear drops. This is going to reset the sear when you fire, like so. You release the trigger, the bolt's going to come back over this, force it down, and reset the trigger. Now, this gun also, like our previous example, only seems to fire in semi-auto, regardless of whether you've got the selector set to single or full. And on this one, I'm really not sure why, because I am not going to take all of those pieces out. What I will do is show you one mystery element here that I think might be related. So I happen to notice there's one screw on the left pistol grip. There are two rivets on the other, and neither of them line up with that screw. So let's take a look under this. All I actually do is rotate that screw 90 degrees. It pops up, and then what have we here but a T-lock? Like, this has got to be the most Swiss possible way to do grip panels. Like, sorry about all of the grease, but I'm not going to wipe that off either. We're going to leave that in there for preservation. Like, you could just use a nut, but instead they use a spring-loaded locking tab screw thing. But to get to the point, what that reveals is this knurled knob under the grip panels. And this is very stiff. It needs some oiling. And I'm not really willing to mess with it too much, but I wonder if this isn't potentially some way to lock the gun out into semi-auto only mode. We know that was a thing with the Sturmgewehr 57 that was eventually adopted. An armorer could swap a little fiddly bit in the fire control group, and it sets the gun to semi-auto only for training or reservist use, and then you can kind of flip it back for full-on actual invasion mode to allow the guns to run full auto. I wonder if this isn't a similar sort of mechanism, but I'm not sure. I don't know exactly how this works. There are no reference materials that I'm aware of that show this at all, show the inside there, nor that actually explain it. So if you know what this actually does, let me know down in the comments. There you go. There is the Waffenfabrik model 1954, WF-54. All field stripped out. I apologize, you can't see the muzzle device, but this gun is just so long that I cannot fit it all within the camera view here on the table. I don't know the total production numbers on the 54, but it appears to have been about 10 guns. There's some documentation of serial numbers from 211 at the earliest to, I believe, 218 at the latest, this one being 214 right smack in the middle. There are subtle variations to all of them. These were definitely trial or prototypes, not so much troop trials guns. It was, let's iterate on the design and see if we can come to something that the Army is going to be more interested in, rather than making a larger batch of guns for another actual trial. Unfortunately, I don't have any of the trial records of what they did or didn't like about this, but it's at least super cool to be able to see it and take it apart and take a look at the insides. And you can clearly see how this is being simplified over the course of production or the course of development from the earlier WF-51. So big thanks to the British Royal Armouries for giving me access to film this incredibly rare piece for you. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.